Hey everyone, welcome back to another hardware news recap. This week we're talking about EVGA's ICX2 Reddit thread that was going on, XTSMC employees being charged with a breach of trust after IP theft, and also some news on 14 nanometer and Intel's present shortage of 14 nanometer. Oh, and one more thing. GTX 2060 theories are looking to gain some momentum here. Before that, this video is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly's high-end thermal paste and liquid metal. Thermal Grizzly's Cryonaut is an affordable, high-quality thermal compound that doesn't face some of the aging limitations of other pastes on the market. Cryonaut has a thermal conductivity of 12.5 watts per meter Kelvin, focuses on endurance, is easy to spread, and isn't electrically conductive, making it safe to use on GPU dies. Thermal Grizzly also makes Conductonaut liquid metal, which we've used to drop 20 degrees off some temperatures in our delidded tests. Buy a tube at the link in the description below. Quick note, as always, on the GN merch stuff first. The mod mats, the next round of them, are shipping to us this week, shipping to us, so then we'll ship them out to you. So if you want to place an order, make sure you get one this round. Go to store.gamersnexus.net. You can back order the mod mat. We've shipped a lot of them so far, but this next round is coming in this week. So we'll be sending that out as soon as it's in. Otherwise, we have other store merch like always, and we'll be restocking these beer glasses pretty soon. So for the first news item, we have EVGA ICX2 discussion. This blew up on Reddit in the past week. This news item has to do with EVGA finding themselves in a bit of a kerfuffle lately. This is from a Reddit thread that was sent to us by several of you, actually. So here's what's going on. This is my best recap of it. It's a long story. There were a lot of emails involved, a long Reddit thread as well. But the gist of it is that when EVGA posted their RTX series pre-orders live, the initial pre-ordering page for the cards that went up, which are not full ICX2 technology cards, but do have ICX cooling, that pre-order page said incorrectly that those cards had the thermal sensors and had power monitoring. And the user who made this Reddit thread anyway, placed a pre-order for the card, found out actually it doesn't have the sensors, and emailed EVGA obviously to complain about this and figure out a solution. So that's the top level. Now, a couple of things need to be defined here. First of all, EVGA and their ICX branding, it gets a bit confusing. So EVGA has had a table on the front page of their site since these pre-orders went up, and it's been clarified since. But originally that table said, the chart said ICX2 for the top end cards. That would be the ones that they now call ICX2 technology. ICX2 and the other card said dual fans. And what those two things mean, originally, ICX2 meant it has the sensors, it has power monitoring sensors, it has all the cooling solution. And dual fans meant that it has just the ICX cooler, but none of the sensors and none of the power monitoring. Now they've clarified it. So now it says ICX2 technology, which means sensors and power monitoring, and ICX2 cooling, which means just the cooler. So it's a bit confusing, to be fair to all of the customers out there. EVGA, to be fair to them, has tried to clarify this, but just to make sure everyone's really clear on this, when EVGA uses the phrase ICX technology, they're talking about the 9 thermistors, the NTC thermistors that are on the PCB that measure the thermal performance of the items near those thermistors. And when they say ICX cooling, it still has the fans, it still has the pin fins, it has the thermal pads on the back plate, it has the asynchronous fans, it has the hydrodynamic bearing in the fans. So the cooler is entirely the same, it just doesn't have the sensors, which means that those cards, when they went up for pre-order, are pretty close to ICX as it was presented, which is with the thermal sensors, except without the sensors in the original publication. So that was the confusion that went on. And EVGA has corrected the page now. They've removed all references of the thermal sensors, and they removed references of the power monitoring on those specific cards. They also offered the customer either a full refund for the product, since they had pre-ordered something they thought was out but wasn't yet, and as an alternative to that, a step up. So it was a paid step up. The customer would pay the difference. They would be first in line to get the new card with ICX, and the ICX2 technology cards, that is the ones with the thermal sensors, ship about 7 to 12 days later, because they come out later, because they're built later. So that was the compromise offered. The customer did have a response to that, and here's what they said EVGA offered. EVGA said, we can offer you a cancellation or refund for your XC card and reserve an ICX2 card of your choice to purchase when they are available for sale. We would not waive the difference in the price between the items and the pre-order on an ICX2 card. At current expectation, you would likely be waiting 7 to 14 business days longer for an ICX2 card than if you kept the pre-order. This is the best estimation I can give you at the time. Either way, you would be first in line for the model of your choice. Keep in mind, however, that the dates may change. The dates would apply to everyone waiting for these cards, not just you. If so, I will update you accordingly. And the customer replied and said, well, they posted on Reddit at this point, and said, so yes, make the customer compromise because of your mistakes, while EVGA literally takes zero responsibility. Obviously, waiting even longer for a card for my new build while shelling out more cash due to them misrepresenting their products didn't fly with me, and I've canceled my pre-order. So I can see it from both sides at this point. It was a misrepresentation. EVGA was incorrect in saying that the card had thermal sensors when it did not. They've corrected that. Probably a bad move, but at least they've corrected it, and now it's just a question of, is EVGA going to email the customers who did place pre-orders? Does that seem necessary? We asked about it, and EVGA is still figuring this out internally, and you may get an email with some clarification on what is an ICX2 card, which even in that email back to the customer was pretty confusing because they said an upgrade to an ICX2 card, even though the existing XC cards have ICX coolers. So I don't know, it doesn't seem 100% clear if EVGA even knows what's ICX and isn't, but they have charts on the page now. So if you were confused, it should be pretty clear. And if you pre-ordered, they might send you a clarification email. We'll see. On the customer end, I have to say, I think the EVGA solution of full refund and cancel or pay the difference and get it first is reasonable. Because if you walk into a store and a product is labeled with the wrong price or something, you bring it to the register and they catch it's the wrong price, they don't have to legally sell that to you at that price, as is commonly thought. So I can see it from both sides. EVGA definitely in the wrong initially, but I don't think they need to give out a free upgrade just because of that. I think the offer was reasonable. But we'll see. We'll see what EVGA does. If any of you get one of those emails, forward it along, we can talk about it next week. Moving on to the next item, there's an XTSMC employee who is charged with a breach of trust regarding IP theft. And this now former TSMC employee, simply referred to as Chow, has been indicted on breach of trust for stealing confidential documents pertaining to TSMC's 16 nanometer and 10 nanometer process technologies, as reported by Digitimes.com. Chow was allegedly planning to begin working at Shanghai Huali Microelectronics, HLMC, where he planned to take the trade secrets with him. And this is actually a case that we talked about previously regarding when we were going over all the Micron stuff, the Micron lawsuits, all the memory, corporate espionage, and IP theft, trade secret theft in the memory world. So this is a continuation of that story. So IP theft and infringement accusations have been common in the last couple of months especially, and China is continuing to try and bring their own domestic memory production online, coinciding with a lot of these common allegations. Micron is currently locked in a legal battle with UMC, and both sides are citing theft of intellectual property and trade secrets against the other one, and also IP infringement. So it's a battle that's still going on. We reported on it pretty heavily in the past, but the biggest news item here is that the ex-TSMC employee has been indicted on breach of trust at this point. So if you were wondering how that went, that's how it went. Next up, GTX 2060 theories gaining some momentum. So this is something that we've talked about a few times now, where we thought the RTX branding might go away at the lower end because RTX, it stands out just because it's different. NVIDIA clearly chose a completely different brand identity for this product. And moving to RTX does imply pretty heavily that the cards will be capable of not only just ray tracing, but all the other stuff that comes with the RTX SDK, not necessarily the RTX video cards. There are a lot of different things called RTX right now. GTX, though, we have publicly speculated, and it is speculation, might make a return for things like the 2050 and the 2060, where the cards just won't have enough processing power to deliver real-time ray tracing in addition to traditional high-fidelity graphics or high-quality graphics and higher geometric complexity, as you would expect with any decent video card. So for that reason, RTX might get dropped. And now that theory is starting to gain some ground. So it's not just speculation anymore. All of this stated, there was a recent NVIDIA interview with financial website Seeking Alpha, and this led to new discussion over the theory. So NVIDIA Executive Vice President Colette Kress said the following. It's a big block of text, but you'll listen closely, you'll hear what everyone's been talking about lately. The quote was, and then just a couple of weeks ago, now we've announced the overall cards for overall gaming. The cards will come out. We'll start with ray tracing cards. Specifically, we will start with the ray tracing cards. We have the 2080 Ti, the 2080, and the 2070 coming to market. This is a major leap in terms of something that people probably weren't expecting for another 10 years to 15 years. The games will look different. There will be a moment that you may pause whether or not this is a film or whether or not this is a game. We're extremely excited to bring this overall technology first to the market and as widespread as we are. So these cards will be available shortly within the quarter, but we're very excited about the excitement both in the ecosystem with developers as well as what this brings to the overall gamers. So yeah, I mean, there's the quote itself notwithstanding. The main thing here is the phrase, starting with the RTX cards. The rest of the quote was, I mean, it was a discussion with a financial website, and you can tell, because there wasn't a lot of technology discussion there. But the big thing, again, the quote was, we'll start with the ray tracing cards, and it could be making a mountain out of a molehill, but I guess the discussion online lately has been that the phrasing, the ray tracing cards, implies that the lower end cards might not be ray tracing enabled, which is kind of what we've been saying and other people have been saying all along. So it might just be feeding that. Otherwise, I don't know, we'll see. The crux of it, though, is just that one quote, and it did come from someone pretty high up at Nvidia. So we'll see what happens. But our current guess, and it is a guess, is that the future cards, the 2050, 2060 cards like that, are most likely going to be things like refresh Pascal. So you might have a 1070 that becomes a 2060 or something like that. Not entirely uncommon, but something that we think might happen specifically for the RTX series and the 20 series of cards. Next up, JPR. So John Petty Research published a new report on video card sales for Q2 of 2018. Q2 typically sees a decrease in sales by about 10% when averaged over the last 10 years of sales. But for 2018, Q2 posted a decrease of 18% for add-in board and all video card sales. JPR calls this out to be, quote, very low when compared to the desktop PC market, which decreased 3.4% quarter to quarter. The AIB sales decline is also skewed by high Q1 sales due to cryptocurrency demand, which JPR thinks impacted the sales numbers for Q2. And year over year, JPR reports a drop in board partner shipments by 5.7%. EVGA's RTX 20 lineup was shown at PAX West about a week ago now. The rest of the RTX cards we showed previously at Gamescom with the RTX announcement, but they had a couple of high-res images that they sent over to us. After a couple of them were lifted from a live stream, we figured we'd reach out and get the actually high-quality versions for publication. So EVGA has, and we'll show them on screen, has a blower design coming up with the acrylic faceplate seen in the other RTX designs. This seems to be their unifying ID for this generation of cards. There's another design that's revamped for the FTW3 series that we previously filmed at Gamescom. And then there's the Hydro Copper FTW3 image that was sent to us anyway, not the actual card yet. And this is an open loop water block card with an acrylic faceplate fitting the rest of the ID and is a continuation of the existing Hydro Copper line from EVGA. There's also the Hydro Copper XC for a lower profile, shorter PCB solution, and then the hybrid series of cards for closed loop liquid cooler solutions, which would include the larger form factor hybrid FTW3 with a taller PCB and the shorter hybrid XC. The final solution is the XC and XC2 series, which we previously detailed at Gamescom and should have some footage of that already. Another report here on Intel potential 14 nanometer chip shortages. So there was a tweet that one of you sent to us recently where it was, we'll put it on the screen, but just talking about how Intel's kind of got one side taken out by 10 nanometer delays, and then the other, where they've been pushing 14 nanometer, is now kind of facing shortages. So the reports and sources, mostly shown by DigiTimes again, indicate a shortage taking form for Intel's 14 nanometer CPUs, specifically as we approach the second half of 2018. We briefly mentioned this back in July when Intel openly admitted in statements to investors and others that there were potential supply issues coming up with increased demand for 14 nanometer as it's aged especially, and this is what was discussed in an earnings call back then. But Intel vowed to work with their customers to mitigate the constant supply shifts and the supply constraints that are affecting them currently. So the supply crisis seems to be taking shape now and could set the stage for price hikes and non-availability for the holiday season, which is fast approaching. Intel supply woes stem from an unexpected demand increase as well as unanticipated 14nm production being pushed onto the fabs, a byproduct of the long-delayed 10nm node. Much of Intel's fabs were expected to be in full production of 10nm by now, so having to retool them for unplanned 14nm silicon production is time-intensive, to say the least. Further exacerbating the problem is Intel's new Amber and Whiskey Lake processors, which are expected to power a slew of new low-power notebooks and tablets, like Acer's new laptops shown at IFA 2018. Whether or not Intel can keep retailers in stock with CPUs will be one of a couple variables that underpin the PC component market in the last half of the year, with the other being the US-China tariff discussion. We should have a complete separate video on that sometime soon, if not already, when this goes up. So check the channel for that one. It might come out after this. AMD announced their new Athlon 200GE CPU with VEGA graphics coming to market September 8th. So it's already out, and it's $55. AMD is aiming to get the Athlon 200GE to be a Pentium counterpart or killer if they have it their way, and that's attacking the low-end market where Intel has done well with its Pentium G4560 and more recently the G5600, two CPUs that, with AMD's competition in the R5 and i5 market where AMD is doing exceptionally well, Intel has managed to hang on to the low end with the Pentium products. But that is now being challenged by the 200GE and by the A320 chipset, which uses a locked multiplier for this. So for the part itself, it is a Zen-based Athlon product. It's a 2-core, 4-thread part with integrated Radeon Vega graphics. The Vega graphics have 3 CUs, while the chip itself offers a 3.2 gigahertz clock rate with no boost. That's just flat 3.2. The 200GE will also support the AVX instruction set, which is an acute benefit over the Pentium and Celeron competition. There's a new rumor about an Nvidia TU106 chip, so we've been trying to label these specifically as rumors when we have them and limit them to maybe one per episode lately. But this one is interesting. There's a version update that was put out for Hardware Info 64, which is actually some of the leading software monitoring solutions one of the best we've used lately. So Hardware Info 64 listed support for an Nvidia TU106 in its update notes, and we know the RTX 2080 is based on TU104, and the RTX 2080 Ti is based on presumably a TU102 chip. Really would make sense. NVIDIA goes down in numerical value as the size of the die increases. So TU100, if it exists, would be the biggest version, although the Volta card kind of already does that. So we could infer from this update note from Hardware Info that the TU106 die is a smaller, more mid-range targeted chip destined for either a 2060 or maybe a 2070, because we haven't actually opened any of those yet. And those are already announced and slated to come out soon. So as always, take this with a grain of salt. These types of leaks have definitely been inaccurate in the recent past even, but coming from Hardware Info, there's maybe something there. Either way, all we know is that there's probably going to be a TU106, which is really not a surprise to anyone other than the fact of the timing of it, I guess. And that may be Q4 if TU106 actually happens. Next up, AMD rolls out multi-GPU interconnects for Vega 20. This is pretty interesting. There are new AMD GPU Linux patches that reveal AMD will have an answer to NVIDIA's NVLink, currently known, by AMD anyways, xGMI. So Phoronix discovered the revelation in a few lines of code in recent Linux drivers, and outside of that, details are scarce. xGMI is built on AMD's Infinity Fabric and will serve as a high bandwidth interconnect for multiple GPUs. Additionally, there is speculation that xGMI's bandwidth could exceed 100 gigabytes per second, and AMD's 7nm Vega GPUs are still on track to be delivered by the end of the year, dubbed Vega 20, but they'll come in the form of Radeon Pro and Radeon Instinct. These are aimed at machine learning, deep learning, and otherwise data-centric applications. While it makes sense for AMD to implement high bandwidth interconnectivity for professional-grade cards, it doesn't mean that it'll come down market to the AMD Navi GPUs or really any of the gaming grade cards. We're not sure where it'll go yet, but it does look like something that will be happening for the professional side. And this is something NVIDIA has been talking a lot about MCMs lately as well, so that'll be a really interesting market as it develops for multi-chip modules. Seems to be the approach that AMD took with Ryzen, and it's worked out great. So it helps to reduce overall die size, which helps with managing cost of high-end products as well. And finally, hardware sales for the week. The Corsair Vengeance RGB series of DDR4 3000 MHz memory was on sale for $150, and that was for a 16 gigabyte kit, which isn't a terrible deal, as our news writer Eric called it. Then finally, there was an Intel 8700 non-K for $280. And we'll link those below if you're interested in them. And as always, subscribe for more. Go to patreon.com/gamersnexus to help out directly, or go to store.gamersnexus.net to pick up one of our mod mats, one of our graph logo shirts, or any of our other stuff. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.